Brian Brizzard, a notorious bastard and owner of short-haul airline company Brian Air, hates everyone. He hates his suppliers, his employees, his passengers, and his wife and children. But Dom Hazel discovers he really loves his poodle, Oodle. And Hazel is an animal assassin. But this time it's a kidnap, and Brizzard's mansion is set in the Essex woods where Hazel, who's trying to be faithful to Julie, finds temptation and confusion. And dogging. The plan threatens to fall apart as Hazel leaves behind more of his DNA than he intends. Chapter 1. Dom Hazel liked to ski. He was good at it, fast and stylish, and had great stamina. But that wasn't why he was wearing a ski mask. He was dressed in black. Black suited him. It set off his dark features and the recent arrival of little grey flecks in his hair. But that wasn't why he was clad in black, all the way down to his trainers. He liked to jog. He was good at that too. But that wasn't why he was jogging. Hazel was on a job, and there were obstacles. He'd taken the van, but he'd changed the number plates and obscured the writing on the side. It was the van he used in his other job. It was a job he'd taken up when he'd retired from the army, and it was more sedate. It involved pottery, which is why there were mattresses and foam in the rear of the van to protect the pots. He had a small shop with a potter's wheel at the back. This was one of the smart things he'd done. He'd bought the shop with an apartment above it when prices were lower and his part of London had subsequently boomed. He still had a mortgage to pay, and this job would help. It was also a coffee shop, and there were always young mothers there. Hazel was part of the attraction, particularly when he worked the wheel. He had large hands and liked to make quite a show of it, fashioning large pots and very specifically guiding the hands of attractive young women. There were few things he was more grateful for than that film with Demi Moore, Patrick Swayze, and a potter's wheel. It had made his personal life very eventful. But tonight was not so sedate. He'd parked the van in a small car park buried in the woods. He'd first thought to use his bicycle, but it was muddy, and he and the bike would get spattered with it. It was the sort of mud that a good forensic scientist could use to place him in the area. He had to be careful. It was late, and he'd chosen a night with thick cloud cover. He removed most of his clothes and pulled on a black boiler suit he'd brought with him. It was a light garment and designed to breathe. He didn't want to get too hot. He'd brought a handheld satellite navigation device. His phone would have placed him there and determined the direction. He jogged through the woods at a gentle pace, aware that his footfalls could easily betray him. It was further than he'd thought, and it was nearly an hour before he broke the cover of the woods onto a narrow, winding tarmac road, at the end of which was a row of neat, detached houses. They were innocent-looking, with hedgerows and roses, reasonably sized rather than large, in which ordinary, not especially wealthy people lived. He slunk back into the shadows until he located the target. It was the last house. He approached cautiously. Then he noticed something. It was just a small glint, but it was enough. A camera, if there was one. There would be others. He followed the line of sight and the blind spots. A moment later, he'd identified 2 further cameras. He maneuvered himself to the rear of the building. Something didn't seem right. He crouched and then fell onto his hands and knees. It was a tripwire. He tiptoed over it and proceeded, still crouching. A flash of light gave away the movement detectors, and he steered round them. He was getting close. There was a fence, a tall fence, in the way. He could make out a shed in the far corner of the garden. He assembled the rifle. It was small and spindly, and it didn't require power, just accuracy.